Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, e buonasera, Lazio world. Welcome to our instant reaction pod. Consider this your stoppage time as we review the unfortunate events of Verona versus Lazio. I'm your host, Shawn McIntosh, and today joined by our returning guest, Bobby Meehan. Bobby, what a tough one. How you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, today was it started off great. I'm down here in South Florida. It's 80 degrees, beautiful day outside, comfortable cruising through the first half. And then, all too familiar, individual errors come back and try to ruin my Saturday again. So other than that, couldn't be better. Appreciate you having me back.
Yeah. If there's one thing Lazio is really good at is ruining a weekend. It's my son is celebrating his birthday. We've got family in town. We'll try and keep this episode a little bit more brief because I don't want to harp on this absolute nonsense from Lazio and ruin another day. So we'll jump right in to talk about these unfortunate events. And you mentioned a nice start to this one, and I thought we were going to be in for a nice day and a nice stroll in the park, and gets off to a pretty quick start. 23 minutes in, a fantastic goal really kicked off from some of the work that Lazzari put in, making a brilliant run, using his pace, giving the ball to Felipe, who does his part in finding Zaccagni, who is returning from injury, immediately making an impact, looking like the Zaccagni of old, a little bit of a flare goal with a nice flick into the back of the net. It's 1-0. We seem to have control of the match. Little bit of some injury concern shortly after 29-minute mark. We're forced to make a substitution. Marusic with a bit of a head injury. Hisai comes in, and for the most part, we look okay. Still a lot of issues in the attack, but Verona hard pressed to really create much.
It was as
And
comfortable of a first half as I've seen all season.
yeah, absolutely. And then in and then we go into halftime, 70th minute mark. There comes a cross, a shot. It catches Provedel off. I think Provedel, we'll talk about it, could have done a little bit better. Parries the ball right into dangerous play, and Henry buries that, and all of a sudden we see ourselves in a 1-1 match with plenty of time to play. And then not but 3-4 minutes later, off of a corner, a rare instance, our man Casale, who also is returning from injury, another former Verona player, finds the back of the net with a fantastic header off of a corner. And here we are, 2-1. Feel like we're handling business. We're back on top, only for that goal to be taken to VAR. A push off from Casale. It was definitely a push off. He was getting yanked, so I thought they might let it go because the defender initiated some of that contact first, but it's ruled no goal. So here we are having to fight for the rest of the match, and then we make some substitutions shortly after, and we sub in Vecino for Ganduzzi, Pellegrini. But before that, we make the substitution of Tati. And Tati comes on for Cheeto, Pedro for Zaccagni. And pretty immediately after, Tati's in the fray of things and earns his opponent a second yellow, which sees Lazio now up a man. And as confident as a team should be being up a man, I immediately retreated to some of the past matches that we've had where we failed to create anything, and failed to create, we did. So this one ultimately gets put on as a draw, and drop points. We look at the final statistics of this one, and it's 71% possession to Verona's 29. Expected goals, a poor 1.06 expected goals from Lazio, really failing to do anything with that possession. 14 shots on Lazio's end, only 5 from Verona. Verona's 1 shot on target was a goal. We had 5 on target, but really not a ton of chances. I mean, both sides really had one big chance. They both converted on their only chances. Really tells a story of Lazio's inability to create anything threatening, and not even putting themselves in a position to miss chances. So, Bobby, give me your 3 words or less to describe this one.
Yeah, I've got a couple, and you can decide which way you want to take them. The first one for me was "Que cazzo pravedel." The second one was more drop points, and the third one, if we want to go a little bit positive, for me was better in transition.
Yeah, they all are. They all tell a story for sure. No, I just I said this a couple podcasts ago, a couple episodes ago, that I thought our hopes were done when it came to top 4, and you were pretty optimistic in that it seems like it's 40 points out, but hey, we're only 4 points out of this thing, and there's just something about this team this year that really doesn't give me a ton of hope. And while the points of the table looked a lot more optimistic than myself and others were feeling, today was just another reason why. Right? Like, I don't care if it's 1 point. It's just this team is not taking advantage of gifts and from some of the fixtures going our way across the league. And this isn't a side that seems to have a mentality. So, I've got, whether we want to focus on mentality, I just straight up put dumpster fire. I mean, we continually talk about this attack, and it's not getting any better. It really isn't. Yes, there's some things there's glimpses. There's some moments where I say, oh, that looks like the Lazio of old. Oh, there's a nice counterattack. But we've got such a lack of decisiveness. Luis Alberto is not playing as well as you would expect. The rare times where we finally make a pinpoint pass, and there was a moment where Luis picks out Zaccagni out wide on a nice long ball, and Zaccagni just isn't able to beat a guy. Wasteful. Cheeto,
for me, it almost seems like when they're as shocked as we are when something actually comes to fruition.
Yeah, there was in the 54th minute an amazing through ball from Luis to Cheeto.
Yeah.
Myself and Cheeto looked pretty shocked that the ball got through, and I took the note that was a classic Luis to Cheeto pass that would have been a goal in years past. But Cheeto's touch on it was poor, and he has to be accountable for that. It's a poor touch. That's a mark on Cheeto. But we're not getting enough of those moments. In the past, we would see that time and time again, and so these players aren't getting enough opportunities, and we really focus on those mistakes because they're so few and far between that we get to see them. And it's really hard for a player in attack to have to take advantage of those opportunities, and that pressure starts to mount. And the more pressure there is to get it right every single time, gets in your head. And that's really a lot of what we see from Cheetah on the national team. And so it's really poor, and it's really frustrating. And for me, and that's why I look at this being a little bit of a dumpster fire, and that's probably aggressively negative. But when we look at this side, we're playing Verona, a bottom 3 team in the league. This run of fixtures that we had were primed for us to get into a position to climb the table, and we did about as poorly as you possibly could have. I can't remember a time in which we've just blown these types of games within such a condensed fixture list. We've
Yeah,
blown
and
these
it's
games in the past, but we've always bounced back, and this is just pretty grim. So
and it's tough too because it feels like a loss. And all the unbeaten streak, if you will, keeps going, but like that's not something to be like happy about, which
yeah,
you would
it's a
think that
loss. We
is.
can
Yeah.
sugarcoat. We can. Oh, it's
Yeah.
it's still a point. I mean, again, this is Verona. This isn't Inter where you can come out of it and feel
Yeah.
good about yourselves. This isn't Atletico Madrid in Champions League. We're playing Verona. These are
Yep.
your Veronas, your Genoas, your Salernitanas. Like this is a
Hmm.
loss. You go into this absolutely expecting all 3 points. This isn't a point one. This is 2 points dropped. Any way you slice it.
Yep.
Something is wrong. So let's just tell me what do you think? Whether it was something tactically, players, what do you think led to where today went all wrong?
Yeah, again, I think that it comes down to just an individual error by Providel. For me, the note that I had was, again, a better in transition. If we want to focus on the positive for a second, I thought that today, granted, the beginning of the season has not been great, and what I've been saying the entire time is that there's been no link up play whatsoever between defense and midfield to start counterattacks. And I thought today that we did that really well. I thought that Luis had a decent game comparatively speaking to what he's had in the past. I thought that he was spraying the ball out wide really, really effectively, and I thought that we looked dangerous once the balls got wide. But once it got to the middle, we weren't clinical enough on where it was. For me, outside of that the first assist from Felipe, that's a major concern for me because he keeps continuing to find himself in dangerous positions and then not doing anything with it, wayward passing. For me, Felipe is a major concern at the moment, and it doubles down on losing his accent and just hoping that we can get him back as quickly as possible. But ultimately, for me, where it comes down to is just an individual error with Providel. And worst case scenario, I know it's hard to hindsight 2020, but you get caught out by a wayward cross that might have been a shot, and instead of just tipping it out and letting your over the back of the bar or catching the ball, it didn't look like it had that much pace on it. You just blindly parry it, and then it's Verona is there to pounce on it, and then ultimately it's 2 points dropped. There's that, and then I also think that just it seemed like for me once Duda went off and we had the man advantage, it seemed almost like we were scared to attack, we were scared to go forward and I don't know if it's just, maybe this is just the Detroit Red Wings fan in me, but like maybe it's just fear of giving up like a shorthanded goal like the Wings did twice this week. I don't know what it is. It's but that one moment instantly and it was for me again, it was like here we go. Like the one tiny mistake in the game and that leads to 2 points dropped.
Yeah, there's definitely a mentality issue, a fear to have some sort of again, just free flowing attack and just to go for it. And then there's which is also a little bit against that, because then we do things like there was a moment in the 82nd minute where Luis has the ball on top of the box and he tries for a really fancy flick.
Yeah.
And
I had.
and it immediately turns into a counterattack against
Yep.
us. And I'm like losing my mind,
Same.
where again we play so conservative and we're afraid to open up. But then in these really important moments by the box, you've got a player like Luis that's trying something stupid and fancy and wasteful.
Yep.
And again, putting us in a position to now defend. And I'm just scratching my head. Like, pick one. Either
Yep.
go all out and play loosey goosey and attack and put your defense at risk, or play safe. I don't know, just pick one or the other. But it
Yeah.
was really irresponsible from Luis in that moment, and uncharacteristic moments too. You've got Pedro, who has this really really poor touch that just immediately goes out of bounds, and I'm again scratching my head where it's, what is going on? This is
Yeah.
truly something mentality that's now got them all shook. in a big way where they just have no belief that they can go out there and win this thing. Did you see the same?
100%. Yeah, and for me, you mentioned two things that I have written down. The 82nd minute giveaway from Luis was inexcusable. You're up a man, you're chasing a goal down, and that, like, just if it's not on, cycle the ball back and restart. Just keep trying to go, keep possession, and instead of that, we're fortunate to get away with with not giving up a quick counter. And the second for me was Pedro. Like, Pedro, I have it written for me. It was absolutely his worst appearance of the season. It was an appearance to forget for me. I can recall multiple times between the 82nd and the end of the game that he's sitting out there on the left and just throwing multiple balls in a row into the closest defender by him. I don't know if it's him just trying to force the issue. I don't know if it's him, attempting to be brave. I don't know what to think about it, but there was a stretch of literally like 3 or 4 attacks in a row that he would make the run all the way to the corner, cut back onto his right, and then immediately just put it straight into the chest of whoever was out there going to man mark him.
Well, I typically like to go into more positive outlook and talk about our man of the match. But we're discussing some of the poor performers. So let's jump into the bidone. And initially I was having some challenges because again it was pretty safe performance. Like, nobody completely stood out as a poor performer until we get to the late stages of the match. So who did you have as your bidone?
I think it's a clear-cut one that is Provedel. It's hard too because he's been our best player of the season, in my opinion. He's saved us far more than he's cost us, no pun intended for once. But yeah, today it's got to be Provedel.
Yeah. I originally I jotted down the 3 names that I had were Cheetah, again, a victim of not getting a ton of opportunities, but in the world that we live in right now, you've got to take advantage of the very, very few ones that you've got. And so that's going to mount pressure, but he wasn't particularly sharp today. Luis, wasn't bad. And so again, I'm struggling. I want to see one player stand out a little bit.
Yeah.
And these are all of our star players, right?
Yep.
These are all the players that wear our armband. And then, of course, the big costly mistake from Provedel, who because that directly impacted the outcome of the match, I as well am going to give it to him. And again, I've called for our stars needing to step up, and today was one of those matches where the 3 players in contention for Bidone and our poorest performers were all the players that are the leaders of this side, and so it's really, really unfortunate. And something. Has to change, and we'll talk about coaching. We'll talk about some tactics, but before we do that, I do want to at least spend a moment on some of the positive.
Yeah,
I'll start with who I would crown our man of the match. For me personally, I give it to, and this player has had a run of positive performances, and honestly, I think. He's up there in standout players for this season. I give it to Lazio, and he was a big part of the goal scored. And while he did not attribute an assist to that, he's getting a hockey assist, and it's his pace. We talk about players just playing with fear and not being direct. Lazio is a player that is direct and does open things up. And what he's done really well this season is grow on the defensive side of things. I don't know that there's a player in the league who is better at cutting off passes than he is. He's done a lot better at man marking. And so for me on this day, I'm crowning Lazio as the man of the match. I thought he was tremendous. Who did you have?
Yeah, and I think that's a good shout too. I think that probably my favorite thing I'm seeing of him this season is he's just instinctual. Like, he just finds himself in the right place at the right time consistently. And for me, it was between 2. I mean, Zaccagni is obviously the first one that comes to mind. Coming back into the squad and immediately making a big influence. But for me, I've been talking to you about it for the past couple of weeks offline. something that I'm always accustomed to is hearing the last couple of seasons, at least, like how poorly our center back play has been. And for me, Gila has like came into the squad and is just smooth as silk. I mean, there's a couple today that you see that he dealt with. Verona is trying to counter press and he's just, passing the ball as cool as you like. A couple opportunities that they overplay a ball, he just gets in front of their striker and shields it out. Goes back to a goal kick. So for me, it would be one of those two. I would probably just lean towards the Kanye, obviously, because it went into the back of the net. But have to give my center backs a shout as a former center back myself.
Yeah, that pairing played really well, and my pre-match notes were a real curiosity to see how the pairing of Casale and Gila would do, because they hadn't played together, and I thought it was a big match for Casale coming back from injury, right away getting thrown into the starting 11. Again,
Yep.
he's a player that struggled this year. I would have liked to seen his return paired with a Romagnoli, who he knows, who's a leader, who can help him. But real kudos to the both of them. They played well, and again, it was up until a keeper error. Defensively, we did art, and I
Yeah.
was ready to really look at the positives of another clean sheet.
Yeah.
Again, this dual look at how well our defense is doing, and then how just absolutely piss poor the attack was.
Yeah.
But again, a keeper error, and we can harp on the keeper error. And I was texting with Caleb about this, and again, real focused on, well, if this one moment wouldn't have happened, we'd be talking about 3 points.
Yeah.
But again, full context, this is a Verona.
Yeah.
I mean, we should be able to give up a goal against Verona. Then you add in the layer that we're up a man for 10 plus minutes, and without any real threatening chances, that's where the frustration lies, because I can get annoyed with a mistake, a 3-3 match, and some individual errors, but we continue to look at the whole picture. And the sum of its parts is playing less than. I believe that this is a side that is better. So tell me, Bobby, pulling out the panic meter, where are you at on a scale to 10?
Yeah, it's growing considerably. One quick point on Casale too with that too is I felt bad for him. You kind of mentioned at the opening of the show that it would have been a perfect return for him had that goal stood. And while there definitely was contact, I mean, you literally can see that Duda and Casale are pushing each other from the initial, like from the start before the ball is even hit. Casale just wins that duel like one-on-one. For me, that was really tough to take on the overtake from VAR. But panic scale for me is at like an 8.5 right now. I was at a 6 or 7, 2-3 weeks ago when we last chatted. It's at least at an 8.5, because we keep seeming to make minimal progress. Like, again, you look at like what's happening in the Champions League. We continue to make like progress. I continue to get excited. I continue to like end games and feel super positive. And then we get back into the league or any domestic play, and it's just more of like the same old crap. So I don't know. I literally don't know. I don't have words. It's an 8.5 for me at a minimum.
Yeah, I'm at a 9, and it is the lack of progress. It is the opponents that we are dropping points to, and we have to look at the manager. I'm not someone that likes to engage in the in or out conversation. I think generally those conversations happen way too early. It's super based on emotion, and then I think fans in particular are stubborn, and so they like to plant a flag on either in or out, and then will never change their mind. They will generally, you'll have your we'll just talk about, use it in the example of our manager, right? You'll have your Sarri Out group, and then we'll go on a run of positive fixtures, and that group will stay silent, and then they will wait for a poor performance to then jump in. And then vice versa. You'll have your group that defends the manager to death, and then there'll be a run of poor form, and they'll stay silent, and then something positive will happen, and they'll jump out. So I try to remain as level headed as possible, and I generally see a lack of accountability a lot of times in a lot of cases with players, and they're the ones that are going out there and playing. But what I'm seeing now is not a ton of today was an individual mistake, but again, against Verona, we were lifeless. And this is
Yep.
now a string of matches where even in those games that we have won, we're not going out there and really putting forth our best. I mean, we're talking about a 1-0 match against Genoa in Coppa Italia. We're talking about a 1-0 against Cagliari. And even in those victories, we're not seeing major progress. We're just escaping by the skin of our teeth. So
Yeah.
I think if you're asking me today on what side of the fence I land on, I'm talking Sarri out.
Yeah.
Now, with that comes the question of who comes in to replace. Right? I think that's the important piece: is who do you bring in to replace him that doesn't turn this into a
Worse.
bigger dumpster fire.
Yeah.
But I don't like what I'm seeing, and he's gotta do something because the players are not responding. There's a continual lack of killer instinct. Again, Verona up 1-0. You got to bag a second or a third,
Yeah.
and it's really problematic. So, are you where do you stand on the whole Saudi in or out?
I'm in the same spot as you. Is that it seems that because I'm if gun to my head, which side am I on? I think that it's time for a change. But if you ask me who it's time to change to, that's one that I genuinely would not have an answer for you right now of like who I would want to replace him with. I think the hardest thing for me too with Sarri is that I don't get any confidence in that, when something goes wrong, it seems like every time he's holding his hands up, he's got his cigarettes in his hands, he goes and sits down on the bench. Like he doesn't like, you look at some of the best managers in the world, and I default to England because it's one that you see a lot in the States. You look at like Mikel Arteta, you look at Pep, you look at Jurgen Klopp. When something goes wrong, they're on their feet. They're almost on the field yelling at their players, being like, hey, let's go, forget about it, move on. Let's get, putting some sort of like confidence into them, like, hey, we can do this. When you just visually, if you're a player that, you look at the moment of what happened today with Providel giving that up, Sarri immediately turns around, he sits down and he's looking down of being like, I can't believe this is happening again. Well, it's like, dude, fix it. Like this is on you for where it comes to. Like if we are again, just from a visual perspective, like I can't if something goes wrong on the field, the players can't gain any sort of confidence knowing that, well, shit, our coach is just sitting down and has no confidence in us to be able to get this done. So like I don't know. It's not good. It's as bad as it's been for me and being a Lazio fan in the last 8-9 years.
Yeah, he's not somebody. He's not your man manager that can go in and rah the group. He's not your Simone Inzaghi that is displaying that passion on the sidelines. He's a guy that's known for his tactical ability, and right now we're not seeing that really come to life. So then you question what are you bringing to the table? And I know there's something there, and I have to look at the whole picture and know that there was progress over these other 2 years. Sometimes you can have a bad run of form, and I don't think that a bad moment or a bad time or a bad half season or even a bad season is always reason to get rid of a manager. I just think we're in this coaching carousel in the world that I'm not a fan of. But there's not a lot going right at the current moment.
Right.
And, maybe it's bringing in somebody who can work alongside of Sadi, who can bring some of that in. We used to have Peruzzi, former great goalkeeper, and he was responsible for coming into the locker room and motivating and being around the club, and such a big figure. And we don't have the likes of Peruzzi, around the club anymore. So Yeah, I think Sarri needs to adjust. One of the things that he frustrates me a ton with, and we'll speak on this player, but there is a stubbornness with Sarri, and I think he's gotten better in some of those areas over the year. I think he has more of a willingness to rotate and give players opportunities than he would have even during his time at Napoli. But he has this fixated mindset when it comes to balance, and it leaves really talented players off the pitch. In this case, the example is Pellegrini.
Yep.
His unwillingness to play Pellegrini because of this mindset that there needs to be balance, and because you've got Lazio in there, you can't bring in a player like Pellegrini, who's also a little bit more offensive minded. But I've said this time and time again, but the hell with balance. That is what limited him playing Luis Alberto and Sergej Milinkovic-Savic together until finally he had to concede. And right now we've got a player in Pellegrini who every time he's come on, he's played incredibly well. And if we are concerned danger. From a mentality standpoint, if we're concerned about our lack of balance against Verona, I mean, is that telling your team
that's
something?
What I'm saying.
From a mentality, like
you just have
this is the match where, again, the hell with balance. Go out there and score a couple goals. You've got Marusic, and then you replace him with Hisai, as if Hisai is some sort of a lockdown defender that is bringing this tremendous balance to the side. Again, if Pellegrini can't go in there and get it done and stick to his defensive duties against Verona, then we've got bigger questions. But let him go out there and prove it. So that's where I really have some issues.
This is one that I genuinely wanted to see them take the Globo Gym approach of, hey, we're better than you and we know it, and we're going to go out and show you that we are, and just not being there. On the notion of like manager, though, I'm going to throw a name out there. It might be a pipe dream, but I'm curious of what your thoughts are. Antonio Conte.
So I don't think that's realistic for 100 different reasons. Wages alone. Patrick makes a really good comment here and on YouTube. Lotito won't fire. The guy is too cheap to do that. Now, I don't know that that's true, that he won't fire Sarri. I know he would want to avoid having to pay multiple managers and keeping them on a salary as much as possible, but a manager like Conte comes with a massive salary, one that Lazio is very likely not to pay. Conte needs a lot of things to be perfect, and I think he can go in there and he can do a lot with a little. We saw him do that with maybe the least amount of quality the Italian national team has ever had, and was able to really get them to go on a nice run in Euros. But he's also, I use the word dumpster fire to kick off the show. Yeah. And he also brings a little bit of a dumpster fire with him after a season or two. Mm-hmm. And so I like some stability. We've talked about the need to consistently qualify for Champions League, and a manager like Conte, is he in it for the long haul? Lotito is such a figure himself that you've got to have the right personality. I'd probably say no. I mean, if we're talking about managers in a pipe dream type of world, I mean, I'm looking at a guy like Diego Simeone.
For sure.
Bring in former Laziale. I'm
just saying, for me, somebody that's available, and if you wanted to try to go out and get him, you could probably make a play. All right, then I'll give you one
Lionel
more.
Scaloni, when he's done with the Argentina national team, another former Lazio guy. There's some folks in just my pipe dream world, but none of them would be realistically available.
I'll throw you one that I actually do think is more realistic. And you talk about doing a lot with a little. I look at what he did with Brighton before, obviously, the dumpster fire that happened at Chelsea. And I would look at Graham Potter also. He had them playing, contending for top 5, top 6 for a couple years in a row. Brighton, obviously, for me, being around that system too, Brighton is, for me, arguably the best recruited club that recruits better than anyone in the world in terms of like finding young hidden talent and then selling them on for like massive fees. So his experience around that and in his time in that sort of environment would make him an attractive one for me too. And one also too that, it would be within the price range. He's looking for an opportunity to bounce back from obviously what was a disastrous appearance at Chelsea, but that's another one that I would throw out if we were to go outside of an Italian national.
Yeah. I mean, and just thinking for me along the same profile of Lazio has produced a ton of great managers that are former players, but the other that comes to mind is Sergio Conceição, former Lazio player, currently the manager at Porto. I mean, a step up in terms of the league that he would be managing, and I think that would be another good shout. But how much he's going to get paid, and it all comes down to a lot of things. So, I mean, I don't know that we're going to pull the plug yet, but I do think it is time to start having those conversations because we may not be in Europe.
We can't keep doing the same thing
next year. We may not be in Europe at all. And so that's a massive step backwards after we had a nice transfer window. And I do believe there's some really good players on this side. And right now we're wasting some of them. Again, Pellegrini, Kamada, who isn't seeing any time. I mean, there's just a lack of developing some of these guys that have come in with higher expectations. So, I think we've got some work to do, and just quickly looking ahead at our schedule, it certainly doesn't get any easier. We go from having to play Verona and Genoa and Cagliari to now having to play back-to-back matches within the same week against Atletico Madrid to close out our Champions League group stage. And then immediately this, a little over a week from now, but 4 days later, Sunday, playing Inter. So can't get it done against the small sides. I mean, I'll say my one glimmer of hope is that we seem to wake up, and it is a bit of a different side, but it's unacceptable to play yo-yo like that. We'll see. Maybe we can just go all in and focus on Champions League and do something special there that distracts us from what is happening in Serie A, and maybe that'll change our tune a little bit. So, but as always, we're on YouTube, of course, and we are on all audio platforms. So check us out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Please give us those 5-star ratings, follow, subscribe, check us out on social media. We'll be here every step of the way to cover the match. I myself won't be covering the Champions League, so Caleb will be back for that one. I will actually be traveling to Italy, so I'll be in Napoli for their Champions League fixture against Braga. For that, doing some work, but win, lose, draw, in good times and in bad, regardless, sempre forza.